Well, here we have the second lesson of the two lessons intended for the fourth week of this module. And I think the best thing to do is a brief recap of what we did in the first of these two lessons, and then continue to expand on the theme of the first week of our 2-week scheduling of planning material. Let me share the screen with you. Okay, with that up in front of you, the first thing I'm going to do is say that I need to run a bit of a refresher with you. And that refresher or recap is one which I believe can be encompassed by a few statements. Decision making is a process, and it's a process which encompasses selecting alternatives, or selecting from among alternatives rather, and even if the choices we make are not right, we know that we can move on with the next decisions we make to try and correct those adverse outcomes. But the reason we have a lot of money invested across the world in organizations, in the public sector, private sector, and civil society is because we're trying to improve the effectiveness of managerial decision making. If 5 out of 10 decisions are poor or ineffective, then what we want is to try and ramp that up to 6 good ones, 7 good ones. It's unlikely all of our decisions are going to be good. We know that because we understand that decision-making is something which takes place in an uncertain environment, that we don't have all the information at our fingertips. And knowing that means that the process, while we can write it down normatively as a desirable objective, in practice, it's not going to pan out that way. So, of all the decision types there are, I think we should give you some sort of practical overview again. If your studies have not come up with this, we know that we can describe routine decision making as routine or non-routine, and as simple or complex. And in that account of things, there's an example of a complex and non-routine decision. It's what to do when there's a catastrophic event like COVID-19, for example. This is not something that happens every day, so you recognize that you're making a decision on the fly. A simple and non-routine decision is something we practice in business all the time. It's what to do if something stops working. Now, we do try to routinize that. We create parameters, and we say, if the machine breaks, then what we'll do is send the material that needs to be processed by the machine to another workstation. But it suggests that there is another workstation. I've just seen a business now that turns over several $100 million a year, which has skilled operators which are not multi-skilled. And because they've not undertaken any job rotation or enlargement, what happens is that when someone doesn't come to work because they're ill, or the taxi doesn't pick them up because there's some sort of taxi protest, the machine doesn't work for that day. That's utterly absurd. So we'll not be able to talk about every single applied business management problem which might ever arise in business, but I will do my utmost best to introduce you to some at the very least. So complex and simple decisions which fall into the routine category are going to be things like this. As I identify over here, if someone gets hurt in the workplace, it must be reported to the Workmen's Compensation Commissioner. And that commission is in Pretoria, and reporting it is absolutely unpleasant because there are so many pieces of paper to fill in electronically, and there are so many statements to obtain in person in order to get an account of what the incident is, and it's required by law that one does this. So it's a very complex activity, but it is routine because you can proceduralize it. You can say step 1 is to, step 2 is to, and so on and so forth. But let's take a routine decision, which is simple. And you know my favorite's going to come up here. So think about the Band-Aids in the first aid box, not so. What do you put? Band-Aid or Elastoplast? What works? It's a simple thing and it's a routine thing. Just write it down on a piece of paper. Copy what the last person bought, and that should be good enough. You see, plasters are a relatively inexpensive thing. We're not talking 100 million rands for the plasters. We're not even talking 100 rands for the plasters. We're talking $35. And that being the case, we should not devote an enormous amount of time and energy to decisions which are not going to impact on the likely success or failure of the enterprise. So I put to you this question. Let's just try and routinize everything if we could. And we won't do it in this first year course, but at levels 4 and beyond, you will contemplate that there are organizations which will subscribe to the notion of being accredited, if you like, or stamped, certified as being an organization which is very satisfactory to deal with because it subscribes to the standards of the International Standards Organization. And that organization, if they can fly the flag, the ISO flag, the implication is they've routinized what they do in their business to such an extent that when you do business with them, you'll find it plain sailing because everyone takes the decisions they ought to take. It is, from an applied business management perspective, an extraordinarily effective way to work out what you're doing wrong in your business, because when you have to write it all down, it tends to jump out in stark relief. The shortcomings that is jump out in stark relief. It's what you're not doing right, because it suddenly seems silly when you write it down that you can be so clumsy about it. Be that as it may, the important thing here is to now say that decision making is an end in and of itself, but we're talking about decision making as it relates to planning. And a plan is about intentionality. Decisions have to be made with respect to what that intentionality is. But we're talking here about intentionality in the short term, today, the next 10 minutes, tomorrow, the next week, as well as intentionality over the next year, perhaps the next 10 years. So it sounds like there are plans which have a temporal component to them. They are either the next 10 minutes plan, or the plan for the day, or the plan for the semester, or the plan for the year, or the plan for the decade. We'll get to that in a bit. I am going to tell you, and this is what you've come to know as Dr. Doug's mantra, planning is something you do, just like everything else in business, in order to increase output and efficiency and quality. Written there as productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness, because I want you to become used to the word choices, you see. But if you don't do those things, you're unlikely to stick around in business for a very long time. That's just the unpleasant truth of it. They are fundamentals, and if you don't practice the fundamentals, then you are probably going to have a business that doesn't work as well as a competitive business next door, which means that the competitive business next door is going to grow past you. My words, it is said that when a company improves how they plan, they can expect all other aspects of the business to improve as well. I'm going to say that comes from your textbook as a statement, and I don't necessarily buy it or buy into it as a notion, because the truth, you see, in practice, that is that other areas of business won't necessarily improve if planning improves. It isn't a given. It certainly makes a contribution, but there are so many other factors that we need to contemplate that it's something more than just having a plan, because you might think that a plan is it, and that's good enough. Might not be quite good enough. Now, this man puts it this way. You can pause the screen, of course, to the video to read this in detail, but it illustrates marvelously my point. the more important thing is that there are 4 types of plan. The 4 types of plan commits people to the intentionality determined by the executive of the firm. And those plans are strategic plans, tactical plans, operational plans, and contingency plans. And I'm going to say to you that they are not actually a hierarchy. So it's not like a pyramid, like the hierarchy of an organization with one person at the top and a whole lot of people at the bottom. And so you're not talking this kind of structure. You're now saying that all the plans are important, but we have to say, where do the plans come from? I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm going to distinguish for you the fact that operating plans are something we undertake or do in order to make a business happen. It's the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis, and we make the decisions on an ongoing basis, and sometimes only on a single-use basis. In other words, when something is happening once, then we make decisions about that once. So if one is running a marketing campaign, then the campaign is a marketing tactic. It has elements that make up the tactic, and those elements might be, for example, putting samples or making samples available in some sort of retail environment. If one does that, then it is very distinctly a very specific event. It occurs only once, and that means that there needs to be a sub-plan, a single-use sub-plan for that one particular marketing event. Contingency plans are what I refer to as plans for just in case, because you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. Where future events are uncertain, where they cannot be predicted, then you make a just-in-case plan. It's a provision. But what's coming up is the big one, because the big one is the plan, which holds it all together. They have long time frames, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. The university strategic planning time horizon is something which stretches to 2030, which you know because your screensaver on a university computer is something which tells you that we are looking at our vision for 2030. And at the end of this decade, we'll evaluate how we measured up against what we intend achieving by then. What we intend achieving as a university has to do with the business of the university, the organizational mission of the university, and the values, the reach values which we subscribe to, and our vision for turning you into graduates that are going to find employment opportunities because you're so damn good at what you do. Mark my words, we'll have to measure this up in a few years' time. You guys are hopefully going to come back to me and say, Dr. Doug, I did it. And I'm going to be delighted by that. Because I need to have a bigger picture, a strategic picture of what it is that I'm doing and whether there's value in it. You see, the value arises on the basis of whether you are able to ease into the employment market and become a desirable hot property for employers out there. That's the very basis of your coming to university, wouldn't you say? Then we talk about tactical plans, and tactical plans are the short-term things. They are the way you set yourself, your fighting stance, so to speak, and you're looking at how you'll accomplish your strategic goals. It's something that you can practice in both the short and the long term. There are tactical plans for a day and a week and a month, and tactical plans which are your posture over a year, 2 years, 3 years. They have to be considered as flexible. Now, we've looked at 4 different alternatives here: tactical and strategic plans, and operating plans, and contingency plans. And I said that they don't fit conveniently into any kind of hierarchy, but that this might be a better way of contemplating how the plans fit. If you don't have a strategic plan to start off with, then none of the others really work. You can't define your plans or determine your plans unless you know what it is that you're trying to achieve. So strategic plans allow you to set your posture. And when you set your posture, you can get cracking with your operating plans or operational plans, and hopefully find enough time to plan for just in case. Also, at this point in time, if you want to make notes over there, you do have to wrestle with this material to get it into your head, so to speak. But I'm also going to ask you to pause over these 2 slides, because this is the recap of the first week of the 2 weeks that we spend on the planning theme. Decision making is a process, and the better one undertakes that process, as I've written there, the better is the outcome of the decision. However, you can't just dawdle hoping to get the best information possible, because you just don't have the time. So you tend to fall into what is sometimes a bit of a trap. You simply make satisfactory decisions. There is also the notion that group decision making is better, although I've explained to you my reservations in that respect. And my reservation primarily revolves around the groupthink of powerful autocratic leaders who create teams and groups of people who think like they do and support their decision making no matter what. That's not good business. The plan, thinking ahead, is we record that decision making is important to planning, that plans are proposals about our intentionality, because the more purposeful we are about our intentionality and how to make things achieve, the less risk there is in what we do. We can't make the risk disappear entirely, but the less risk there is. And finally, you've learned now that there are 4 different types of plan: strategic, tactical, operational, and contingency or just-in-case plans. And with that in mind, the next thing we will look at is the strategic plan, or what I refer to for you guys as the master plan. But that's the second week of the planning theme. And I need to have you prepare yourselves with regard to this material and get it under your belt and into your head before you move on to the second week.